Before the story begins, if you enjoy gripping sci-fi tales where humanity stands against the galaxy's darkest horrors, like, comment, and subscribe. It keeps stories like this alive. Now let's dive into today's episode. Alien mercenaries cornered a human medic. Her apex protector didn't wait for orders. The storm over Epsilon 9 was dying, but the war hadn't noticed. Lieutenant Rian Voss steadied her breath as the mobile medical crawler rattled through a shattered valley, its armor scorched, its engines coughing. The dim light of emergency lamps painted the med bay in blood-red hues. Every heartbeat felt like another second stolen from the dead. Rian's hands moved in a blur, stabilizing a miner's leg, injecting coagulant, sealing a chest wound. Outside, lightning flashed across the jagged skyline of bomb spires, and for an instant she saw the reflection of her own face in a blood-smeared viewport. Too young, too tired, and too stubborn to be afraid. Vitals holding. Next, she barked. Private Levon, her only remaining orderly, slid a gurney toward her. Signals flickering again, Lieutenant. Comms are cutting out. Keep cycling it. We can't lose uplink with command. But even as she said it, she knew the line was gone. The storm wasn't natural. Epsilon 9's electromagnetic fields were corrupted by the war's aftermath. The colony had become a graveyard of interference, smoke, and ghosts. Her thoughts drifted briefly to the one person who wasn't supposed to be here, Kale Dravik. Special operations genetically bonded with it. He'd called her hours ago before vanishing into the static. Stay inside the crawler, Voss. Valker's restless tonight. She'd laughed at that. The idea that the apex predator, the thing entire fleets had failed to kill, could be restless like a cat in the dark. Now she wasn't laughing. The crawler jolted violently, throwing her against the med table. The lights flickered, then died, replaced by the cold blue glow of backup strips. Levon. What was that? He was at the sensor panel, pale and wide-eyed. EMP search, not from the storm. Something's moving outside. Multiple heat signatures. Rian snatched her sidearm, a compact plasma pistol that looked embarrassingly small in her gloved hand. Can you identify them? Negative. Too much interference. A metallic clang rippled through the hull, deliberate, heavy. Then another. Then 10 more. The pattern wasn't random, it was surrounding them. Rian's pulse quickened. Lock down the med bay. Get everyone away from the doors. Levon swallowed hard, bolting to secure the hatch. The injured groaned in confusion, their voices thin with fear. Rian stood near the viewport, forcing her eyes to adjust. Through the flickering stormlight she saw them, shapes moving like ink in water, armor glinting with green sigils. Drather mercenaries. Her throat tightened. The Drather didn't take prisoners, they sold them. And a human medic was worth a small fortune. The first blast tore through the crawler's side plating, showering sparks across the med bay. The concussion dropped her to one knee, ears ringing. Before the smoke cleared, the hatch blew inward, and a towering figure stepped through, its helmeted face etched with alien runes and a cruel metallic grin. Human officer, the voice rasped through a translator implant, you hold medical command codes. You will surrender them. Rian rose, wiping blood from her lip. I don't have command codes. I'm a medic. You're wasting your time. The mercenary's claws flexed. Then your death will be quick. He raised his rifle, but before he fired, a low hum rippled through the air. The crawler's emergency beacon had reactivated for a heartbeat, pulsing once, faintly, into the storm. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The mercenary tore the transmitter from its housing and crushed it. No one will hear you. Rian stared at the twisted metal in his hand, mind racing. If Kale had been anywhere in range, that flash might have reached him. If not. She didn't let the thought finish. I've got wounded who need treatment, she said, keeping her voice steady. Let me work and I'll cooperate. The alien tilted his head, amused. Cooperate? You think you're negotiating? 2 more mercenaries dragged Levon into the room, his arms pinned. One pressed a plasma blade to his throat. Rian stepped forward. Stop. I'll give you what you want. The leader turned toward her, interested now. The codes. Yes, she lied. But they're encrypted on the main medical console, it needs my biometric to access. She gestured toward the rear compartment, every movement careful. He motioned for 2 soldiers to follow her. Do not test my patience, human. Rian led them down the narrow corridor, her mind working faster than her fear. There was no help coming, not in time. The only weapon she had was her wits and a crawler full of volatile med fuel. She stopped beside the console, pressing her palm to the screen. It flickered alive, demanding authorization. She entered a code sequence she knew by heart, a triage override. The system began heating the stabilizer tanks under the floor. One mercenary noticed. "What are you doing?" She looked over her shoulder, meeting his gaze with cold calm. "Ending this." The explosion didn't come, not yet. The crawler stabilizers needed 30 seconds to overload, and she didn't have 10 before they'd realize the ruse. "Move," one barked, shoving her toward the wall. She stumbled, hitting the floor, and through the cracked viewport she saw a streak of white fire slash across the dark clouds above, something breaking through orbit like a falling star. For a moment the battlefield fell silent. Even the mercenaries turned to look. The object screamed through the storm, trailing blue plasma, and struck the ground somewhere beyond the ridge with the force of a meteor. The Drather leader snarled, barking orders. "Scout the impact site." Rian stared out at the smoke plume, heart pounding. She knew that descent profile, she'd seen it once before in classified footage. A steel pod falling through fire. Kale had come. And if Kale had come? Her lips parted in a whisper the aliens couldn't hear. "Oh God. He brought it." The mercenary nearest her leaned close, his breath reeking of ozone and rot. "You think that was rescue?" he hissed. Rian forced a faint smile, the kind born of exhaustion and defiance. "No," she said softly. "That was a warning." Outside, the storm deepened, rumbling with something alive. The ground trembled once, a deep, resonant thud that rolled through the earth like a heartbeat. Then another. And another. The mercenaries froze, their weapons raised, eyes scanning the dark. Rian didn't move. She just watched the valley beyond the shattered hull as the shadows seemed to thicken and breathe. Something was out there, something that didn't belong to the night or the storm. And it was coming for her. Kale Dravik gripped the flight controls of the Ragnarok until his knuckles turned white. The storm-scarred world of Epsilon 9 spun beneath him, a bruised sphere wrapped in black clouds and crackling static. The distress ping he'd caught was faint, one pulse barely more than background noise, but he knew that signal pattern. He'd programmed it himself for her. "Rian," he muttered, his jaw tight. The name burned like a scar he refused to let heal. The ship's AI whispered telemetry, flight vectors, risk assessments, but he ignored them all. He didn't need data. He needed to move. Behind him, the containment vault rumbled, a sound not mechanical but alive. The reinforced chamber held something massive, something breathing in low, rhythmic growls that made the deck plates vibrate. Kale keyed in the override sequence, hesitating for half a heartbeat. "You feel it too, don't you?" The air shivered, as though the creature on the other side of the alloy bulkhead understood. A pulse brushed his thoughts, wordless, instinctive, powerful. Fear. Rage. Protection. Valker was awake. Kale sealed his helmet, the faceplate sliding down with a hiss. He glanced once at the surface display, mercenary heat signatures, faint but clustered near Rian's last coordinates. That was all he needed. He pushed the thrusters to maximum, the Corvette screaming through the storm layers until plasma fire streaked across the hull. The Ragnarok wasn't built for atmospheric entry at that speed, but neither of them cared. "Hold on," he whispered, whether to Rian or to himself he couldn't tell. At 3,000 meters he disengaged the containment clamps. A massive drop pod detached from the underbelly, free-falling through turbulence like a meteor wrapped in steel. Inside it, Valker crouched in darkness, his black chitinous armor flexing under restraint. His eyes, two molten amber orbs, snapped open. The psychic tether between man and beast flared. Kale's heart stuttered as Valker's mind brushed his again, a wordless command raw and primal. "What?" "Then go get her," Kale growled. The pod struck ground with a sound that cracked the valley floor. For a moment nothing moved. Then the restraints inside burst apart, and the apex emerged. Valker towered 3 meters tall, plated in bioforged armor that shimmered like obsidian oil. He was neither beast nor machine, but something born of both, designed by alien warlords to be the perfect predator. But now he served only one will. Drather mercenaries advanced toward the crater, weapons drawn, sensors flickering. Their leader barked orders, static cutting through his voice. "Target the impact site. Contain whatever." He didn't finish. Valker moved faster than the eye could track, a blur of muscle and armor crashing through them like a storm given shape. Plasma bolts hissed harmlessly off his hide. One merc scream cut short as he was lifted by the throat and hurled into the dust. Kale's boots hit the ground moments later, his drop harness burning from the descent. The air reeked of ozone and scorched metal. He saw the crawler, Rian's crawler, half buried in debris. The med bay was torn open, smoke curling from its broken hull. Valker, clear the perimeter, Kale ordered. The apex didn't answer in words, only through the link. A flicker of acknowledgement and satisfaction. Kale sprinted toward the crawler, sliding through the wreckage. Inside, the scene was chaos, equipment shattered, walls scorched, bodies strewn in unnatural poses. He found her kneeling beside a fallen patient, her uniform torn, face streaked with ash. Rian. Her head snapped up, disbelief flickering across her expression. Kale? He dropped beside her, scanning for wounds. You're alive. Barely, she said, voice hoarse but steady. You weren't supposed to come back. Kale met her eyes through the cracked visor of his helmet. Try telling him that. Behind them, a guttural roar shook the wreckage. The apex stood silhouetted against the lightning, its armor dripping blue-black blood. Rian turned, eyes wide. She had seen Valker only once before, behind containment glass, drugged and chained. Seeing him like this, unleashed, was something else entirely. God, she whispered. You brought the monster. He's the reason you're still breathing, Kale said quietly. She didn't argue, though the look in her eyes said she wanted to. You risked court-martial for this. Kale pulled a power cell from his belt, slotting it into her broken med console. You were worth it. Before she could respond, Valker snarled, a low, vibrating sound that rattled their ribs. Kale spun toward the valley mouth. Through the smoke, more mercenaries emerged, their heavy walkers stomping forward, shoulder-mounted cannons locking onto the crawler. Rian's voice tightened. There's too many. Then we thin the numbers. Kale's tone was steady, almost calm. He touched Valker's flank as the apex lowered beside him. Their bond surged, the world sharpening into shared instinct. One mind. Two bodies. Valker leapt before Kale finished his thought, launching into the oncoming line of enemy armor. The first walker didn't even fire before it was torn open, cockpit shredded like paper. Kale took cover near the crawler's entrance, picking off stragglers with precise plasma bursts. The smell of burning alien flesh mixed with smoke and rain. Rian ducked behind a collapsed panel, clutching her sidearm though she knew it was useless. Her voice carried through the din, you're outnumbered. Kale reloaded smoothly, eyes on the chaos. So were we when they made him. Valker was a blur, tearing through the Drather like a hurricane of blades. When one managed to stab a plasma spear into his chest, the creature didn't even flinch. He yanked it out and drove it through the attacker instead. The battlefield became quiet in seconds, the storm's thunder reclaiming what little sound remained. Valker stood amid the carnage, chest heaving, blood, his and theirs, steaming off him. Then, slowly he turned his head toward Rian. Her instincts screamed to run, even as her mind reminded her that Kale was in control. The apex studied her for a moment that felt like an eternity. Then he crouched low, chuffing softly, his massive claws curling inward. Rian blinked. Is he bowing? Kale lowered his weapon, stepping closer. He remembers you. Remembers me? From what? Patching your skull back together after you bonded him. Kale almost smiled. Something like that. The connection between them, the human and the beast, was more than neural science. It was trust forged in blood and shared trauma. Valker didn't obey out of programming. He chose to. Rian rose unsteadily, glancing at the ruined battlefield. What now? They'll send reinforcements. Kale looked toward the horizon where distant lights flickered, more mercenaries drawn by the noise. Then we hold until command catches up. And if they don't? He checked his rifle, voice low and certain. Then we make sure no one touches you again. She stared at him, trying to read what was left of the man she once knew beneath the hardened soldier. For a heartbeat, something unspoken passed between them, something fragile amid all the ruin. Another tremor rolled through the ground, distant but closing. Valker's head tilted, nostrils flaring, muscles coiling with anticipation. Kale followed his gaze. They're regrouping. Heavy units. Rian's shoulders slumped. We're not built for this kind of fight. Kale's reply was almost a whisper, carried away by the wind. Neither were they. Valker let out a low growl, half warning, half promise. The storm above flickered again, and for the briefest moment lightning revealed the trio, one medic, one soldier, one nightmare, standing together amid the wreckage of war. The next wave was coming and none of them intended to run. The rain began to fall. The storm thinned to a cold drizzle by the time silence settled over the valley. Smoke hung low, curling around twisted metal and scorched alien corpses. Rian crouched beside a fallen mercenary, scanning the wreckage for anything useful. Her gloved hands were steady, but her mind refused to rest. The battlefield looked like a wound torn into the world itself, ragged, still bleeding heat. Behind her, Kale worked in silence, repairing a damaged comm relay from the crawler's ruins. His armor was cracked, his left arm bound with improvised synth wrap. Every movement was deliberate, mechanical. He didn't seem to feel pain anymore, just a dull awareness of it. Rian broke the silence. "You're bleeding through that patch." He didn't look up. "So are you." She wiped at her forehead and found her fingers red. Occupational hazard. For a moment, the two of them just listened, to the static crackle of the storm, the low rumble of Valker's breathing as the creature lay coiled nearby. The apex looked almost peaceful in rest, though the occasional twitch of his claws betrayed an unease that mirrored their own. His armor still smoked in places, and each exhale carried a faint metallic scent. Rian spoke softly as if afraid to wake him. "How do you even keep something like that under control?" Kale paused mid-motion. "You don't control him. You learn to live alongside him." "That's not comforting." He gave the faintest hint of a smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. "It's not meant to be." She turned to study Valker, curiosity laced with wariness. "You said he remembers me." "Oh. He's not supposed to think like we do." Kale's voice lowered, almost reflective. "He was designed to kill us. Every human face used to trigger instinctive aggression. When I captured him, I expected to die trying to tame him. But the neural bond rewired both of us. He learned memory, recognition, empathy maybe. Or something close enough to it." Rian shook her head slowly. "That's not science. That's insanity. Maybe both." He connected the last relay wire and leaned back. The faint hum of the comm system returned, fragile, intermittent, but working. "If we're lucky, this will get a message through to orbit." "And if we're not?" Kale looked toward the black horizon, where faint orange lights flickered in the distance. Scouts or reinforcements, she couldn't tell. "Then they'll find us before help does." The implication lingered, heavy and cold. Rian exhaled, rubbing the ache from her temples. "You always did have a gift for making me feel better." He finally met her gaze. "You always did know how to survive." Something in his tone softened the edge of exhaustion pressing on her. It reminded her of a field tent years ago, of Kale laughing despite shrapnel in his shoulder, telling her she was the calm in a universe that had forgotten how to breathe. The memory vanished as quickly as it surfaced. She nodded toward Valker. "What happens to him if you die?" Kale didn't hesitate. "He dies too." Rian frowned. "By choice or by design?" He hesitated this time. "Both." The comm unit crackled, a pulse of static, then a faint human voice. "Ragnarok, this is command. Report status." "Repeat, report status." Kale straightened. "This is Lieutenant Dravik, groundside on Epsilon 9. Medic team under my protection. Hostile forces neutralized for now. Requesting evac and orbital scan for additional hostiles." Static swallowed most of the reply, but one word made it through. "Denied." Rian blinked. "Denied? What do they mean, denied?" Kale's expression hardened. "They don't want to risk Valker being captured or studied by the Drather. Command would rather we vanish than compromise data integrity." She stared at him, disbelief sharpening her tone. "You mean they're abandoning us?" "Not us. Him." Rian stood abruptly, pacing the cracked floor. "That thing just saved every life left here. And they're treating him like cargo?" Kale didn't answer, but his silence said enough. Valker stirred, a low growl vibrating through the air. The psychic link between man and creature shimmered like a heat haze. Frustration, protectiveness, anger. Kale pressed a hand against his temple, steadying the surge of shared emotion. Rian saw the strain twist across his face. "You're still linked, aren't you?" "Right now." "Always," he whispered. "When he feels rage, I feel it too. When I'm afraid, it reaches him. It's not just a connection, it's contagion." She crouched beside him, voice quieter now. "And what do you feel right now?" Kale met her eyes, and for once there was no soldier behind them, just a man weighed down by impossible choices. "I feel trapped. Between what I am and what I made him into." The comm sputtered again, a burst of interference followed by a new voice, not human. The tone was sharp, guttural, and far too close. "Human frequencies detected. Stay alive. The bounty is doubled if the apex is breathing." Rian's stomach turned to ice. "They're listening." Kale rose, checking his rifle. "They're closing." He signaled Valker, who responded instantly, rising to his full height. The stormlight glinted off his armor as he spread his claws, flexing like a predator rousing from slumber. Rian grabbed her medpack, securing what little remained of her supplies. "You can't take another full-scale fight." Valker's injured, you're half dead, and I have about 12 field patches left. Kale's voice came out steady. We don't fight it. Not here. We move to the ridge and regroup. She hesitated, glancing at the wounded civilians still huddled inside the wrecked crawler. And them? Kale's expression didn't change, but the muscle in his jaw twitched. Evac coordinates are preloaded in the crawler's autopilot. If they stay sealed in until dawn, they might make it. Might? She snapped. He met her anger with quiet certainty. We don't get to guarantee anything out here. We just keep moving until someone can. Valker stepped closer, lowering his massive head near Rian. She flinched instinctively, but his motion was slow, deliberate. The creature's golden eyes met hers, and she saw no hatred there, only recognition. Kale placed a hand on Valker's armored shoulder. He trusts you. Rian's voice softened. That makes one of us. Kale almost smiled again, but it vanished when the ground trembled, distant impacts echoing through the valley floor. Searchlights pierced the horizon, sweeping closer. They found us, he said. How long until they reach the ridge? Minutes. Rian tightened her pack. Then we run. Kale nodded once, calling Valker with a silent pulse through the link. The apex turned, muscles rippling beneath his armor, and began bounding up the slope with impossible speed. Kale and Rian followed, the storm at their backs and enemy searchlights chasing their shadows. As they climbed, Rian glanced over her shoulder one last time. The crawler burned quietly below, the only trace of humanity in a landscape that wanted nothing more than to erase it. She turned to Kale, voice strained between breaths. Tell me something honest. He didn't slow. What? Can we win this? Kale's eyes flicked toward Valker ahead of them, then to the black sky where no help would come. Winning's not the point anymore. Then what is? He looked at her, rain cutting thin lines through the dirt on his face. Surviving long enough to make sure he doesn't die alone. The words lingered as they disappeared into the storm, the sound of pursuit growing louder behind them. The ridge loomed like the edge of a different world, and somewhere beyond it waited either salvation or extinction. The rain began again, heavier this time, as if the planet itself were trying to wash the blood away. The ridge loomed ahead, jagged and slick with rain, a dark spine dividing the valley from the distant horizon. Kale led the way, boots sinking into mud, rifle tight in his hands. Valker moved ahead of them, a shadow larger than any predator Rian had ever imagined, muscles coiled and ready. Every step forward felt like climbing into the teeth of inevitability. Behind them, the Drather forces pressed close, their armored walkers and pulse drones cutting through the rain like knives. Searchlights scanned the terrain, slicing shadows into fragments that danced across the ruined earth. Rian adjusted her pack, securing the few remaining medkits and ration supplies. She could hear her own pulse in the quiet spaces between gunfire and storm. Kale's voice was low, clipped. We make it to the ridge. We hold there until extraction. No heroics. Rian shot him a look. You think the Apex agrees with that? A low, vibrating growl answered her question from ahead. Valker's claws dug into the mud as he flared his nostrils, sensing the incoming forces. Kale pressed his hand against the creature's flank, channeling a silent pulse through their bond. The connection was instantaneous, one mind moving as three. The first wave hit as they reached a narrow plateau. Pulse bolts tore through mud and shattered stone, and Valker sprang forward, a black hurricane of muscle and armor. Walkers toppled like toys beneath his blows, and drones exploded midair from claws that shimmered with energy. Kale fired with precision, cutting down any Drather who survived the initial impact. Rian ducked behind a fallen spire, assessing the wounded civilians crammed into the crawler's reinforced compartments. We can't keep this up, she shouted over the roar of the storm and the cries of dying aliens. We'll run out of ammo before they do. Kale's jaw tightened. Then we make it count. Valker pivoted mid-leap, catching a walker with one massive claw and hurling it into a ridge wall. The explosion illuminated the ridge, bathing Rian and Kale in flickering light. She caught a glimpse of something in the Apex's eyes. Rage, yes, but also calculation, almost strategy. He wasn't just killing, he was protecting. The Drather commander, clad in black alloy and adorned with alien insignias, emerged from the smoke. His eyes narrowed at Valker. Bring me that monster alive, he barked, activating a null field generator that pulsed blue energy across the ground. Kale's blood ran cold. He knew what that meant. Valker staggered, the psychic link momentarily severed, muscles trembling as if a part of him had been ripped away. Kale gritted his teeth and pushed through the pain, guiding Valker with sheer instinct and experience. Rian's hands flew over her medkit as she patched a gash along Kale's forearm. "He can't fight like this," she shouted. "We need to retreat." Kale shook his head, eyes locked on the battlefield. "We can't leave. Not when they've cornered you." The apex roared, the sound echoing across the valley like a cannon blast. It was a sound not born of nature but of something far older and deadlier. Valker lunged, tearing through the nearest soldiers with a speed that defied comprehension. Even through the null field, his instincts guided him, augmented by the bond that refused to break. Kale fired, not at Valker but at the mercenaries closing in from the flanks. Every shot counted. Every breath was precious. Rian moved between the wounded, tossing medpacks with one hand and firing a sidearm with the other. Adrenaline sharpened her focus, fear sharpening it further. One Drather warrior leapt for her, plasma knife raised. Valker's shadow fell over the alien, claws closing with a precision that saved her in an instant. She stumbled back, heart hammering, staring at the predator that had become both shield and weapon. Kale called out, voice low but urgent. "Rian." The crawler, override the reactor. She froze for half a heartbeat. "What?" "Force a detonation. Just enough to clear a path." Rian's fingers flew across the controls. Sweat and rain mixed on her brow as the reactor powered up, energy spikes humming through the hull. The mercenaries nearest them froze, torn between attacking and retreating. The null field pulsed stronger. Valker roared in frustration, lashing out with inhuman force. Kale held his ground, feeding calm into the bond with Valker, letting the predator know exactly where he needed precision. The first explosion tore a crater beside the ridge, sending shards of metal and rock into the air. Mercenaries screamed and faltered. Valker seized the moment, hurling himself into the thickest cluster, claws and teeth exacting brutal justice. Kale grabbed Rian's shoulder. "Move to the left. Now." They sprinted across the ridge, mud sucking at their boots. Behind them, Valker carved a path of destruction, tearing through armored units with relentless efficiency. One by one, the mercenary reinforcements fell or fled, their formation shattered. Rian glanced back and caught a flash of the Drather commander. His null field nearly depleted, fury etched across his armored face. Valker's amber eyes locked on him, and with a terrifying precision, he struck. The commander's weapon went flying, and he hit the ground in a cloud of dirt and sparks. Kale exhaled sharply, scanning the horizon for any remaining threats. The valley was littered with wreckage and smoke, bodies and broken machines tangled together in a brutal tableau. Rian's chest rose and fell in ragged gasps. Is it over?" Valker knelt by her side, massive head lowering until his eyes met hers. There was no rage now, only recognition, a silent assurance. Kale stood behind her, rifle lowered, finally allowing himself a moment of relief. The storm was still, the rain falling softly now, washing over the devastation. In the distance, faint echoes of retreating mercenaries drifted across the valley floor. Kale placed a hand on Rian's shoulder, steady and firm. "For now." Rian nodded, gripping the medkit tightly. She understood. They had survived this battle, but the war was far from over. Valker exhaled, a deep, vibrating sound that carried through the earth, a warning and a promise. Kale's gaze met the predator's, and for the first time since the engagement began, he allowed himself to trust the bond entirely. The ridge ahead offered temporary safety, but the horizon was alive with movement. Reinforcements would come. Challenges would return. Rian tightened her pack and took a slow breath, preparing for the next wave. She glanced at Kale. "We hold here together?" He nodded, eyes scanning the storm-dark sky. "Together." Valker's claws dug into the mud, ready. The three of them, a medic, a soldier, and a monster, stood united on the ridge, ready to face whatever came next. And somewhere in the dark beyond the rain, the enemy waited, sharpening their teeth, counting the cost of confronting what they had underestimated. The valley was quiet for now, but the storm was far from over. Dawn crept over Epsilon 9, weak and fragile, casting pale light over the scarred valley. Smoke still curled from toppled walkers, and the remains of the mercenary assault smoldered in pools of mud and plasma residue. Kale stood at the edge of the ridge, scanning the horizon, the first real quiet he had felt since the descent. Valker crouched nearby, massive shoulders rising and falling in slow, deliberate breaths, his amber eyes scanning for threats that no longer came. Rian moved among the survivors inside the crawler, her hands steady as she patched minor injuries and distributed what little rations remained. Her uniform was smeared with soot and blood, some hers, some others, but her expression was determined, unyielding. She looked at Kale once, noting the lines around his eyes and the tension in his shoulders, and realized the war had left its mark on both of them. "You did it," she said softly, approaching him. "We made it through the night." Kale's gaze didn't leave the horizon. "We survived," he corrected. "There's a difference." Rian frowned. "And yet here we are." He allowed a faint exhale, the first sign of relaxation. "Here, yes. But surviving this doesn't mean the galaxy will give us peace." Valker stirred, rising to his full height, his massive claws flexing against the mud. Kale stepped closer, resting a hand lightly against the predator's armored flank. The bond between them pulsed with quiet intensity, two minds intertwined, tempered by blood and instinct. Rian stepped forward, meeting Valker's gaze. She knelt, cautiously placing her hand near his clawed forearm. "You're still breathing," she whispered. The apex tilted his massive head, amber eyes softening as if acknowledging her presence, and exhaled a low, resonant sound that vibrated through the ridge. Kale's hand dropped from Valker's flank, and for the first time in hours he looked at Rian fully. "He doesn't just protect me," he said. "He protects you. He chooses to." Rian blinked, the weight of understanding settling over her. Valker was no longer merely a weapon of war. He had become something more, a guardian forged from the fiercest instincts of predator and the loyalty of a soldier. Her throat tightened. "And what do we owe him for that?" Kale's gaze drifted toward the valley floor. The mercenary forces were scattered, many destroyed, others retreating in panic. Reinforcements would come eventually, but Valker had made sure that for now, the humans on Epsilon 9 remained untouched. "Nothing," he said quietly. "Except to survive long enough to keep him from ever being taken again." Rian nodded, feeling the truth of his words resonate in her chest. She adjusted her medkit, her hands brushing against the patchwork scars of the night. "We're not just surviving for ourselves, are we?" Kale shook his head. "We're surviving for the ones who can't fight. For the people who depend on us. For him." Valker lowered his massive head, resting it near Rian's shoulder. She froze, unsure whether to recoil or accept the gesture. Slowly she reached out, laying her hand atop his armored snout. He exhaled against her fingers, a steady, almost soothing vibration. The distant horizon flickered with movement, searchlights sweeping the valley, signals of returning mercenary scouts. Kale stepped forward, raising his rifle. "They'll come back," he said. "But this time, they'll know what humanity can bring to the battlefield." Rian followed, sidearm in hand, eyes narrowing at the distant glint of armor. "And Valker?" He flexed his massive claws, amber eyes burning with intelligence and unspoken promise. Kale's hand touched his flank again. "He's our edge. Our advantage. And he's not waiting for orders." Rian allowed herself a smile, small but genuine. "Good. I like that about him." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and ozone, mingling with a lingering trace of alien energy and scorched earth. Kale crouched beside her, voice low, almost a whisper. "You know, when I first captured him, I thought I was saving humanity from a weapon. Turns out he saved me." Rian's gaze softened. "And I saved you." Kale's lips twitched in the faintest acknowledgement. "You patched more than wounds that night. You reminded me why survival mattered." Valker growled softly as if affirming Kale's words. He stepped closer, nudging Rian lightly with his massive head, a gesture of bond, trust, and perhaps affection. Rian looked at the creature she had once only feared. "You're not just a weapon anymore," she murmured. "You're something else entirely." Kale's voice cut through her reflection. "Exactly. And whatever the galaxy throws at us next, we'll face it as one." The valley trembled once more, not with attack but with possibility. The storm clouds parted slightly, and the pale light of dawn illuminated the jagged ridge. Smoke rose from the wreckage below, a testament to the battle fought and survived. Valker's silhouette stretched long across the mud and broken steel, majestic and terrifying, yet unmistakably loyal. Rian stepped forward, placing her hand on Kale's arm. "Then we keep moving. Together." Kale nodded, eyes flicking between her and the predator. "Together?" he echoed. Valker exhaled, a deep vibration that seemed to settle over the valley like a shield. He lowered himself, allowing them to pass beneath his towering form. For the first time, the creature allowed them space, trusting them to carry the weight of survival forward. They descended the ridge, moving cautiously toward the crawler. The survivors followed, weary but alive, and Kale scanned constantly for threats. Every shadow, every whisper of movement could be another ambush, but he felt the edge of fear dull beneath the certainty of Valker's presence. The medbay inside the crawler hummed back to life as Rian activated the repaired systems. Lights flickered, panels rebooted, and communication sparked faintly, struggling to re-establish contact. The machinery was fragile, a symbol of human ingenuity patched together by desperate hands, but functional. Cale allowed himself a moment to breathe. "It's not over," he said softly. "But we've survived the impossible tonight." Rian met his gaze, and for a heartbeat, the battlefield, the storm, and the destruction faded. There was only this, humanity, and the creature that had become more than a weapon, more than a guardian. Valker shifted, nuzzling against Cale's shoulder, and the three of them stood together, a silent oath passed without words. The distant hum of engines warned that reinforcements might still approach, but Cale's confidence had returned. Valker would not wait for orders. He would protect them, and they would protect what they had survived. Rian glanced at the Predator, then at Cale. "The galaxy doesn't know what it's up against." Cale's lips curled slightly. "Let them try to find out." Valker's roar echoed across the valley, a sound that carried both warning and triumph, shaking the mist from the ridges and stirring the first light of a new day. Together they stepped forward, leaving the smoldering battlefield behind, ready for whatever came next, bound by blood, trust, and an unbreakable connection forged in the fires of war. And in that moment humanity had its fiercest protector at its side, one that would never wait for orders.